Thank you, guys. It's early. Let's see if we can get into this. It's pretty early for a heady topic like how AI is transforming sales. But I got up even earlier, so I'm ready to go. Hopefully we can do a little thought experiment this morning. If you were able to rebuild enterprise information architecture, that's a heavy question for 8 a.m. If you were able to rebuild enterprise information architecture, how would you do it? Carefully. Carefully, yes. Carefully. I would argue that we would, any of us, if we had the pen and we could rewrite history, we would rebuild information architecture for the enterprise the same way that we built the internet. Enterprise information architecture predates the internet by a long shot, and it inherited all the characteristics of client-server technology and all the silos and data architectures that existed before the internet. When the internet came, it was built in such a way that the more people who use it, the more beneficial it is to each of the people who uses it, which is a very different paradigm. So when you are on Amazon and it says people who bought X also bought Y, that's not because you bought Y, that's because somebody else bought Y. And it's making a comparison between you and that someone else, and it's giving you a recommendation based on pattern matching across the collective intelligence of the internet. And when you're on Netflix and it says you might enjoy watching one of these shows, any guesses what percentage of shows show up on that first navigation screen of Netflix? What percentage of the total catalog shows up? Almost none. It's 6%. 6% of the total titles show up when you log into that home screen of Netflix. And those 6% are selected for you. And it's not because of what you watched last night or what you watched last week. It's because what other people watched that's being pattern matched to you and your viewing patterns. If you want to go find the other 94%, you got to go hunting deep. You got to search. It's hard to find. So collective intelligence of the internet actually benefits each person, and we're going to talk about what if collective intelligence were aimed at sales. Could it help us do our jobs in sales? Let's take a look at the last generation sales technology. It's called CRM, and I would argue that CRM is dead. Not dead as in it's not going to exist. Dead as in it can't add more incremental value to our sales teams. It has reached its natural progression of being able to add value, and the information that's contained in CRM is no longer helpful in helping us find tomorrow's deals. The U.S. economy is on a tear. It's the most impressive, sustained period of growth in the U.S. economy, and that should mean good things for us and our sales teams, right? It should. We're driving this U.S. economy. Now, part of this is our fault, but this is what quota attainment is doing for sales teams. Part of this is our fault. 92% of us are raising our top line target every year, and then we're adding more people to the equation, and then we're giving our reps 5.4 pieces of technology each so that they can do more stuff. That technology looks like CRM and its derivatives, and yes, our people can do more stuff, but they're not hitting quota. And part of the problem is they're working on the wrong stuff. How many of you think you have reps that are working on the wrong stuff? We all do. And it's hard. This is a conceptual, I'm going to show you a conceptual graph, but if you saw real data, which we have for lots of customers, it would look very similar to this. You've got good prospects over here that have a high propensity to close, and bad prospects over here that have a low propensity to close. And then you have effort that is distributed evenly across all categories. You've got reps that are starting at A and calling down to Z. Why would a rep ever work on something that has a low propensity to close? Well, it's easy, because that's who calls me back. That's who schedules my meeting. That's who will take a meeting in person. That's who can fill up my calendar. But if we knew who the reps or who the prospects were that had a high propensity to close, and we had the ability to steer our reps where we wanted them to be working, we'd be doing something more like this. We'd be stacking all their effort towards the right on the stuff that has a high propensity to close. And if we could give them any additional productivity with tools like those 5.4 technologies that we've given our reps, that's fine, use that, but only use it once you've expended all your effort over here and then start moving to the left. That's what we would do. The problem is none of that information is in CRM. The information that's in CRM is about deals that I did yesterday. And reps have voted with their feet. They spend 18% of their time begrudgingly in CRM because we make them, because we want to see what they're doing. We want to be able to manage them, we want to be able to help them, we want to be able to coach them, but the information they're finding in CRM is not helpful to tomorrow's deals. So they spend 65% of their time willingly in technologies like the inbox, LinkedIn, and other sales productivity tools, because they're looking for tomorrow's business. They're less concerned about recording the activities or deals of yesterday, and they're more concerned about where is a deal from tomorrow. They've voted with their feet. If we want to aim them at tomorrow's deals, that really is a job for artificial intelligence. I'm going to define something that I think is more powerful than artificial intelligence, a subset of artificial intelligence. But artificial intelligence is real, and it's here to stay, and you can see the CEO of Google says it's more profound than electricity or fire. And AI runs on data. So if we want to see into the future, predict the, if we use our internet life as an example, we want to predict the types of titles that we're going to enjoy or the types of merchandise that we're going to enjoy. We actually need data, and we need the right kind of data. We need data about who's buying and how they're buying, and buyers, like anytime we're in a high kind of change environment, which we saw from the US economy, that means stuff's changing by definition. Buyers are changing. So Forrester says 62% of B2B buyers say they can actually generate a short list and a set of selection criteria based only on information they can find on the internet, which is different than it was 20 years ago or even 10 years ago. In fact, to shorthand it, the chief product officer says today's B2B customers are acting like consumers, and the buying committees that in 2015 were comprised of 5.4 people are now comprised of 6.8 decision makers. So stuff's changing. If I want to look into my own company's history to figure out who the buyers of tomorrow are and how they're going to behave, I'm not going to find as much information as I think I'm going to. CRM actually is not going to have the information that I need in order for me to be pointed to the future. Instead, what I will need is collective intelligence. So back to our example of, what if enterprise architecture looked like the internet? Well, it might look something like Waze. Any of you use Google Waze on your phone for navigation? It's a pretty cool concept, right? It's 23% more accurate than Apple Maps. Why? Because literally every person who has Waze installed on their phone, and they call them Wazers, it's kind of interesting, is streaming data back to Google. So in real time, millions of people are streaming data back to Google about how fast traffic is moving on the road. But more so than that, Wazers are able to report traffic incidents, police sightings, construction. And so at any given time, someone 20 minutes ahead of you on the same route that you're taking is sending information back to Google that Google can then interpret. This is community contributed data. Google is able to interpret that, turn that into signal, and then help recommend and reroute you so that you can get from point A to point B. That's not because you already were at point B. It's not because you were there yesterday. It's not because you've ever even been there. It's because the collective is showing you the path that is least obstructed and quickest to get from point A to point B based on what you're trying to do right now. Well, you can imagine that sales could be built the same way. And I'm going to show you some examples of what the collective could do to help us get from point A to point B. This is information coming from the collective, not from our own history. If we want to predict the future and we're using our own history, we might be fundamentally limited. But if we open that up to the collective of people who've gone before, we might have more opportunities to optimize our route from point A to point B. So imagine if your reps, instead of logging into that, which is a list in CRM, and starting at the top and going to the bottom and doing that peanut butter thing, working on whoever will return my calls. Imagine if they logged into something like this. Scripted and prioritized, next best prospect, next best action. And not only is that scripted and laid out for me, but I can leverage the wisdom of the crowds, the collective intelligence that sits behind it, to navigate carefully. So this tells me that the next best thing I should do is call Kyle. He has a score of 89. After I call him, I'm going to email him. Then I'm going to call him again. Then I'm going to email again until I get him engaged. But what the collective tells me is people who called Kyle at Groupon also called Natalie, Kara, and Hamed, also at Groupon. Well, which people? Other people. People in the collective. Does that mean that Natalie and Kara and Hamed are part of the buying committee? I don't know. Is it 100% guaranteed that you're going to like this next show on Netflix? I don't know. But other people who like shows that you liked this next show on Netflix. And other people who called Kyle at Groupon got engagement from Natalie, Kara, and Hamed at Groupon. So that could save me a lot of time. That could be a virtual buying committee right there. And I could enroll Natalie into a play of her own, Kara into a play of her own, and Hamed into a play of his own. That saved me a bunch of title matching and LinkedIn research. Now I want to call Kyle. I like the fact that it looks like his number is live. There's like 3 bars of signal there. How do we know that? Because 6 days ago, somebody in the collective, in the network, placed a call to those 10 digits and got engagement. So I have a fresh by date on this phone number, and I'm not wasting my time dialing those 6 digits. After I call Kyle, I want to send him an email following up. It's templated. It has to do with the voicemail that I left him. But I do not like the signal behind that email address. 1 bar looks really bad. So can I go ask the collective what a better email address would be? Not without violating PII. But there are all sorts of email guessers out there. And an email guesser is only as good as an email guesser is, but what if I could check the guesses that come out of that email address against the experience of other people who are 20 minutes ahead of me down that road? So then I can take those email strings and say, which of those email addresses shows any signal at all? And it turns out that Kyle.wit, which is a common formulation for an email for somebody named Kyle Witt, actually does show signal because somebody got engagement at that email address, and so I'm going to use that one because that's better than the one that I had. I can hit send on the email right now, or I can ask the collective again, virtually ask the collective again, when does that email address engage with email? Because some people engage with email in the morning, some on the weekend, some in the evening, some in the afternoon. In this case, kyle.witt@groupon.com is in the inbox at 3 p.m. So I can use collective intelligence to make sure that when Kyle logs into his email, my email's at the top and not 3 screens down where he's probably never going to get to it. Again, this is just data that's streaming off of the natural activities of other people who've gone before. We call it data exhaust. It's not self-reported data. It's not the type of data that you find in CRM when a rep decides to swivel and say 3:01 p.m. attempted phone call, Mary Jones, no answer. Nobody ever does that. But if you want information about what works and what doesn't work, you have to capture all of it. And you have to capture it naturally. The same way that Waze captures data naturally off the back end of your phone, you don't have to think about it at all. You just do your regular thing. The collective can grab data off the back end of selling activities. And once we have enough of that data, natural data exhaust, we have enough positives and we have enough negatives, then AI can do its thing. Because what AI is trying to do is recommend more of what works and less of what doesn't. So it means it needs to see a lot of stuff that worked and a lot of stuff that didn't. A lot of phone calls that landed, a lot of phone calls that didn't. A lot of emails that worked, a lot of emails that didn't. A lot of sequences of interactions that worked, a lot of sequences of interactions that didn't. And as soon as I have, if I'm up in the 100 million or 100 billion sales interaction category, now I've got enough collective data to help guide you from point A to point B and guide your sales reps from point A to point B. Okay, so that's an interesting thought experiment. Any thoughts or reactions to that before we go to this next section? Collective intelligence to drive sales. What if that were true? Then wouldn't we see all of the technology juggernauts falling over themselves to get access to a new world that's not siloed, that's architected the way the internet is architected, that has data that fuels it the way the internet has data that fuels it, that has data that gets better with time, not worse with time? Well, we are seeing that. And this is only the last few years. We call it the cloud data wars. And we think that data is the new oil. It's not only about workflows anymore, which is how software was originally built. It's now about the data that informs those workflows. So in 2016, IBM bought the Weather Channel. Why? Because they care about a talking head on a screen talking about the weather? No. It's because of the data, because weather informs sentiment, and sentiment informs buying patterns. It was worth $2 billion to IBM. Later that year, Microsoft got in a heated bidding war with Salesforce over a social network, LinkedIn. Why? Because they care about social network? No, because it's 400 million professionals who are involved in buying and selling decisions, and it's evergreen information about them and their careers that's updated continually. $26 billion, all of Wall Street said they overpaid for it. Now all of Wall Street is saying they underpaid for it. But at the time that Wall Street said they overpaid for it. Later that year, after having lost that bidding war, Salesforce tried to go buy Twitter and failed. Again, evergreen information about sentiment and activities and behaviors out in the real world that can inform buying decisions. We're not able to get that. So then they went and partnered with IBM Watson to gain access to the Weather Channel data, fine. And then they paid $6.5 billion to acquire MuleSoft. I would argue not nearly as valuable as getting the source data. MuleSoft is to integrate data, that's great. So now if I can go find my own data sources, I can get them to connect in, and if I can get data that's more fresh than what's in my CRM and I can pull it in and augment my CRM, great. So MuleSoft facilitates that, but it's not a raw data source in and of itself. Later in last year, Microsoft, Adobe, and SAP announced that they're going to try to break down the barriers of the way enterprise architecture was built, and they announced the Open Data Initiative. So let's try to get the same definition of customer, the same definition of order, the same definition of inventory across systems, and we'll call it the Open Data Initiative. We'll normalize and standardize those data definitions, and we'll get our systems to talk to each other. Again, Microsoft, Adobe, and SAP. Then Salesforce literally the next week announced their own Customer 360, which I think was just an announcement. And then the zinger. SAP, in the largest ever acquisition of a venture-backed software company, $8 billion. Bill McDermott, this transacted in January of this year. Bill McDermott says this is the biggest idea of his lifetime about Qualtrics. Qualtrics has customer experience data. SAP has operational data. Bill McDermott calls this the X's and the O's. $8 billion for data. So if this were all true, you would expect to see something like this. Companies spending billions of dollars falling over themselves. But wouldn't you also see sales teams trying to get in on the action, and that is what we're seeing. So these are all companies who, on top of CRM investments, which, by the way, had their day, and CRM did add a lot of value 10 years ago and 15 years ago, but it's reached a point of diminishing returns. So now, in an effort to go find incremental value from collective intelligence, these companies and many more are spending millions of dollars above and beyond what they spend on CRM so that they can get plugged into the real-time signal that comes from the collective, just the same way we do in the internet. And you wouldn't only expect to see them spending money, you'd expect to see them making money, which we are also seeing. Plus 20%, plus 30%, plus 40%, $50 million, $20 million, $100 million. So in a world where we're scrambling to hit quotas and we need tools that our sales teams actually want to use, giving them more CRM or appendages to CRM that allow them to record history or examine history is not that interesting. Giving them the ability to leverage the collective is very different than artificial intelligence. When you think about artificial intelligence, you think about math, and that's great. When you think about collective intelligence, it's literally just data from someone 20 minutes down the road who's right ahead of you. The best sales reps, if they need to sell into a new prospect they've never sold into, let's say they're selling into Cisco, the first thing they'll do is call a friend of theirs who's already sold into Cisco. And they'll ask that friend, how does it work? Who's got budget? Who is a detractor? Who's got power? Decipher the org chart for me. Help me put this together. Well, the internet is built in such a way that I can actually get that in real time from people who've gone before, the same way I get information in real time from Wazers who've gone before. And rather than it replacing anything that I'm doing or helping me do more of the wrong stuff, it helps me do stuff that works. Not artificially, but based on real experience from people that are 20 minutes ahead of me down the road. So that concludes our thought experiment. What if sales technology could be built in such a way that the more people that use it, the more useful it is to each of us? And what if we could reverse the decline of quota attainment, which is now at 53%, by leveraging technology the same way we use technology in our everyday lives? I would argue that that is possible, and we would love to talk to you more about it during the breaks. Thank you very much. Done, and let's move on and take some questions. I would love to have a conversation. Any questions?
How do you integrate with your current CRM?
Yeah, so the technology there needs to be a system of record, and that system of record is CRM, and that'll exist forever. So when you saw earlier on the screen where that little modal popped up over the top of CRM, it's actually talking to CRM in the background. So it's seeing it's seeing the list, it's prioritizing the list, it's writing information back to the CRM as a system of record, which phone calls and emails are happening and what are the results of those. So it's treating it like a database.
And is the collective just within the organization, or is it collective everything you gather across all customers, all?
That depends on which type of information. So if it's PII, it's only stuff within your organization. But if it's not PII, if it's patterns and profiles and the types of things that work and the types of things that don't, that's being collected and harvested across everybody, not just people in your organization. So when I saw people who called Kyle, also called those other 3 people, those weren't people in my organization. Those were unnamed people somewhere out there who got engagement with Kyle and also got engagement with 4 other people around Kyle.
So I'm going to occupy all your time.
Yeah, let's do it. Because nobody else is fighting you.
Yeah. So if it's industry specific and you don't have a lot of collective data, then the value, it sounds, would be less than you found if you have a lot of data. Like let's pick the government, right? So if you don't have a lot of government data, then you wouldn't, all those recommendations wouldn't be as valuable.
Correct.
Until you start to build the base.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
It's like you're the first person in Georgia who ever installed Waze.
I am the first Wazer. Gotcha.
It's not going to be that helpful. There's nobody else ahead of you, so what are you going to learn?
But then as the organization grows, it would develop more data that then we can learn. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes.
So when you work with some of the organizational tools that are out there, like a Discover IT or the old Rain King, I think they acquired, often the data would be incorrect, and they'd always make a request. Would you know, please help us correct our data
Right.
as you discover these corrections. My thing is I'd be helping, and then all of my competitors subscribe to the same service.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't want to improve the data. I'd want to collect, fix, use what I could,
Yeah.
and leave it alone. So how do you protect your privacy to where you're not potentially enabling it?
Yeah. Well, I may come at it from a different angle. I loved Jigsaw. I actually thought it was brilliant. I was happy to contribute data to Jigsaw if I could, because I knew that I'll never contribute more than 1% of what's in there, and I'm going to benefit from 99% back. So, and the internet doesn't, I mean, sure, you can browse privately and you can not share your history, but you just don't get the benefit back, right? Like, you don't get the benefit back of movie recommendations or Amazon purchasing recommendations unless you're willing to let it do the pattern matching. So those are just settings.